I hate to start a video off by saying I told you so, but when I made my video initially stating why the PlayStation Classic was going to fail miserably, it was met with a lot of dislikes and people calling me out, telling me that I'm a Nintendo fanboy or among many other things. Well, the PlayStation Classic has gone hands-on, and the reviews have been less than stellar. JT. Chris Kohler, a writer for Kotaku, recently went to PlayStation headquarters, and for about 3 hours he had some hands-on time with Sony's nostalgic mini console. He played a bunch of the games and said that they all played fairly well. But a lot of the concerns that he had going into this were fully realized once he actually got his hands on the system. The PlayStation Classic replicates one of the most annoying features from the original Nintendo Classic and Super Nintendo Classics, where you have to actually get up and press a button on the console itself in order to reset the system. Instead of being able to press a button from the controller, you actually have to get up. I guess it's really going for that old school nostalgia feeling of not having the modern conveniences of technology to be able to switch what game you're playing. He goes on to say that most of the games played fairly well with limited issues or blurriness, with a couple pop-ups on Ridge Racer and things like that, but for the most part the emulation was spot on, which at the end of the day is what the most important part of one of these mini consoles is getting the emulation right. The biggest takeaway from this entire thing is what the PlayStation Classic is using to run the emulation. It's using an open source PlayStation emulator called the PCSX Rearmed. This is something that's basically a same exact version of an emulator that you can get on your PC. Sony is using an open source emulator to play these games on the mini console. And while it might not sound like the biggest deal in the world, I'm reading into this a little bit, and wow, it explains a lot. Initially, I thought that the games they selected from the list of 20 that were included with the Classic were due to licensing issues. But after researching this and having my own experience with playing the PlayStation emulators on my computer, there are a lot of hiccups and issues with tons of PlayStation games. Many of them do not emulate properly, and seeing how Sony did not create their entirely new emulator to play on this, they're using an actual open source one to do so, they were probably running into a lot of the same issues that anybody who plays these on their PC would have. Obviously, they don't want to have any issues with the emulation, so part of what they selected to be on this console was due to what they were able to get emulated perfectly. If a game had hiccups or issues, they probably just scrapped it from the list. So it's not necessarily a licensing issue that prevented a lot of games being on this, but because they don't emulate properly, that's why they didn't go with them. The first one that comes to mind is Tomba. I always called it Toomba. Someone called me out last time on that, so sorry. As far as Tomba is concerned, it didn't emulate properly when I play it on my computer, and I would imagine if that was a title that they were considering to put on it, they probably were having issues trying to run it on the emulator, which is why they just scratched it if they were initially considering it to be on it in the first place. He goes on to say that many of the games on the PlayStation Classic were the European versions. When he booted up Final Fantasy VII, he got the Classic licensed by Sony Computer Entertainment of America splash screen, but then when he ran Battle Arena Toshinden, Grand Theft Auto, or Tekken 3, the screen said licensed by Sony Computer Entertainment of Europe, with tiny differences that you'd have to select a United Kingdom flag from a menu if you want Grand Theft Auto's text to display in English, and he wasn't sure if there was anything beyond that. But that's a little bit concerning and kind of feels rushed if you're not going to spend time on getting the actual ROMs from the games from the countries that you're going to be selling this in. It just feels like everything's being shoved together and as easily as possible to sell it as quick as possible. The PlayStation Classic assigns a separate virtual memory card to each game, and when you exit out of the game you've saved and go back to the menu, there's a memory card icon below each one that will let you view or delete your save data, just like the original PlayStation. So with Final Fantasy VII, how you would have your original first save memory card would be a picture of Cloud, and then the next one would be Barrett, and the next one would be Tifa, and so on and so forth. This is how it emulates it. So you can save multiple files via the in-game memory card. However, if you want the modern convenience of just exiting the game and saving the save state, you only have one save state to save from, as opposed to what Nintendo did with the SNES Classic where it gave you 4. PlayStation is giving you 1. And if you want a different save spot to use as you're playing through the game, you have to overwrite the previous one. Not the biggest deal in the world, not a deal breaker by any means, but it is a little bit annoying that a system that's already out did it better than what Sony's doing with the PlayStation Classic. Chris goes on to say that bare bones is probably the most accurate summarization I can give of the PlayStation Classic so far. What does that tell you about this system? There are no screen borders, no graphic display options. There's a QR code that will load up manuals on the PlayStation website, but it wasn't functioning during the time of his preview event. There's a screensaver option that will dim a screen after a few minutes, and even the game selection menu itself is basic as hell. There's no nostalgic theme song or any other additions that would make you harken back to the days of playing the original PlayStation to give you that warm and fuzzy feeling of, hey, I'm back playing the original PlayStation, for those of us who, I don't know, had some nostalgia for it. I feel like this is a quick money grab for Sony. Everything about it screams money grab. They could have inserted a DualShock controller instead of just a plain basic PlayStation controller. But after doing some digging and finding out that they're using a PSX emulator on this thing, it explains a lot. I bet that Sony originally wanted to go with a DualShock analog stick, but they couldn't get any of the games they wanted to emulate properly on it with that. So what do? They go to the original controller and go to the original PlayStation emulator and put that on board it just to avoid any complications with emulators. This is crazy to me, and I know I'm not going to talk about the Raspberry Pi thing, but there is an argument for that in this case where you can really do it better yourself for far less of a cost and have far more flexibility and toe a gray area with legalities as far as ROMs are concerned. Or need I bring up the PSTV option again, where Sony already came out with the PlayStation Classic but did it better years ago, called the PSTV, where you can download whatever you want, use a DualShock analog controller on it, and have a great experience all around. Just because the PlayStation TV had a terrible marketing campaign doesn't mean it's a bad system. Yeah, it could have been better in a lot of areas, but holy crap, they definitely nailed the emulation when it comes to playing original PlayStation games and giving you an option and variety of whatever you wanted to play that's available on the PlayStation Store. This is something that if you want something that you can just plug and play, you can plug and play it, but just know it's extremely limited, extremely basic. This is bare bones. It's something that I am not excited about anymore. Sony could have knocked this out of the park, but instead they went the really cheap route of just going for a quick cash grab during the Christmas season, and man, this is going to disappoint a lot of people. In case anyone is wondering, the controllers are USB, so there is one slightly good bit of positive coming out of this is if you buy the PlayStation Classic, you should be able to use the PlayStation Classic controllers on your PC, assuming that Sony doesn't use some sort of encryption issue with it that doesn't allow you to do that, but we're going to assume Sony's going bare bones with this and very basic. I wouldn't imagine they'd put much time into blocking those to be used on computers. Anyways, that's how I feel about the PlayStation Classic. That's the hands-on situation with it, and it's not looking very great. It's not very promising whatsoever. Let me know in the comments, do you still plan on going through with buying this thing? Or have you changed your mind as more information comes out? I'd be very interested to hear. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a good one.